At this time, we'd like to call to order the meeting. If Director Scheidegger will stop badgering the staff.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your counsel and guidance. I needed that.
That's-
And I stand advised.
I'd like to call to order the Thursday, June 26, 2014 regular meeting of the Sac Metro Fire District Board. And having done that, I'll ask Director Gould if he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director. The Metro Cable announcement open session meeting is videotaped for cablecast on Metro Cable 14 and is replayed at 1:30 p.m. That will be Saturday, June 28th, 2014, and Monday, June 30th, 2014 at 6 p.m. on Channel 14, webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. Open session meetings are also available for viewing on the district's website at www.metrofire.ca.gov. Opportunities are provided for the public to discuss matters of public interest within the jurisdiction, including items on or not on the agenda. To that end, Board Clerk, do we have any speakers this evening?
No, there are no speakers this evening.
Seeing no speakers, we will then move on to the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Director Wood?
Aye.
Scheidegger?
Aye.
Gould?
Aye.
Pearson?
Abstain.
Clark?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
And Dorzali?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving then to the action items, and these will be taking individually on the advice of legal counsel. Item 1, fiscal year 2014-15 and 2015-16 preliminary budget with Ms. McFarland.
Mr. President, actually, I'm going to be leading the budget presentation this evening.
All right.
And Board of Directors. And CFO McFarland will be there to help me out on technical issues as we move through it. I think it's an exciting night. It's a great opportunity to change some of the ways we do things. We're always looking for cutting-edge ways to move forward. And for the first time since I've been here, we actually have a tax year where our property taxes are starting, albeit very slowly, they're starting to increase. And so this is the first real budget where we're not battling an unknown of how much more money we're going to continue to lose. We do have an unknown out there of about $3 million potential in appeals, but we feel comfortable enough that the growth is at least to the point that all that would do is diminish what our actual growth would be. It would not necessarily take us in a negative direction. So it's with a lot of pride that we're going to present a 2-year budget proposal to the Board of Directors. I think that it's important that we have a 2-year guide in front of us as we move forward. And there's a couple caveats as we give you this presentation on this 2-year preliminary budget. The first is, as all budgets are, there are some assumptions. And due to the fact that this next fiscal year is going to be exceedingly tough economically, although it will improve in the second year of the budget, it requires some tough choices and changes in the way we deploy services. And whenever you work with labor contracts, under California law, you are required to meet and confer over the impacts of those changes that you are proposing. And so you will see ideas such as a single role paramedic program in here being expanded, light force concepts, and reductions in staffing of personnel throughout the district. And what I want to caution you on is that those are all subject to meet and confer. We have properly noticed the union and engaged in our first meet and confer session with organized labor in regards to these issues. We will continue with a series of meetings as we move down the road. And again, remember, this is a preliminary budget, not expected to be adopted as a final budget till probably late August is our normal MO on that. And so there could be very well changes that still equate to the same amount of savings. But if there's agreement between labor and management and the board of directors to come up with the savings that we need to get the budget to where it is, it may look different than what you have in front of you today. But the substantive part of the budget, as far as where we're at and the amount of revenues that we need and expense reductions, are the same. And so it's in the spirit of working with labor as we have over the last several years very closely that I wanted to give that caveat that we are in meet and confer with them on this, and this is exactly what it is, a preliminary budget, and it is subject to change. Clearly, our guiding principles is to maximize public service levels. Our expenditure charges or changes are limited to operation critical items, and we talk about vendor costs, contractual obligations and mandates, limited personnel changes. We conservatively estimate revenue and cost recovery amounts, and we share theirs very openly with the labor union and their accountant, their CPA, who is in attendance tonight. And we minimize the use of unassigned reserves. As you know, this board of directors policy is to try to not to use reserves at all. Unfortunately, coming into this next year, which is pivotal, we will have to dip in to that reserve. However, we will have a balanced budget by June 30th, the conclusion of the second year of this two-year budgeting process. And before I get into more detail, I would like to thank Rhonda McFarland and her entire finance staff. This was a huge, huge lift. They put a two-year budget together basically in less than 3 weeks. And that was because at our last budget meeting, which was inclusive of labor, labor was unable to come up with other cuts because they've given a lot over the years to the district. And there's a capacity there that you get to and you go, I just don't know that we can do any more. And with that, that left us with a deficit that we had to close. And at that time, I felt it was important to put a two-year budget together. We basically dropped that task onto the finance department, and they have worked tirelessly, long hours, to come up with this preliminary budget that we're going to present to you tonight. So it's a work in progress. It was put together with a lot of late hours, but we feel we have a solid product for our preliminary budget to move forward. First year we're going to start is with fiscal year 14-15. What's important to know right up front on 14-15 is we had a several $million budget deficit, probably about $5.5 million. You'll see that later that we needed to close. And through the proposals that we're making and that we're meeting and conferring with organized labor on, we only will have to dip into reserves by about $1.6 million this next fiscal year. And that's what the proposal is before you. And so I want that up front, and then I'll explain to you how we actually get to that. And in getting to that, it's really a one-time expenditure that we're going to spend on a helicopter retrofit that's about 2 years overdue. I think the important thing is that this district is really, really dependent on property tax. And so one of the things that you'll see as we move from this year to the next year is our property tax has been as high up in the high 70s as what we depend on property taxes to run this district. And you'll see that under medic cost recovery, we've started to really expand that and some of the other service charges. And really what it's about is diversifying our revenue streams coming in. It's going to be exceedingly important, I think, in the future to maximize those other revenues, especially in the EMS provisions, of medical service and cost recovery to diversify out our revenue stream. If we're really just property tax and we don't diversify, we saw what happened over the last 7 years, or starting in '07 and '08, to us when we lost approximately $24 million in property tax on an annualized basis. You can see that in 14-15, starting in 13-14 mid-year and moving into the prelim for 14-15 and 15-16, we maximize our other revenues. You're going to see those grow with some proposals that we have in EMS and moving to an expanded single role, which is the future. And that, of course, we're meeting and conferring with labor on. But our property tax increase is really incremental. And as we get to the end of this process tonight, that whole issue that we talked about, and I think the CFO went over that about Prop 8 recapturing those dollars, we're losing them on a permanent basis because houses are selling at 40% or 50% less their value, and then they're reset on a permanent basis. So at least you can see that we're starting to head the right direction in property tax, and clearly we're working very diligently on expanding that EMS revenue and cost recovery. This is just to show you that it's doing more with less. And you know, we told the public several months ago that our call volume continued to increase, our revenues continued to decrease, and when they came back, they were going to be slow. Already this year, we're set, I believe, and Chief Holbrook's here, to eclipse probably our 84,000 number as we move forward significantly again this year in call volume. A general fund, one of the issues that comes down is about labor cost. You're going to see in this budget 80% when you look at other areas of service delivery like ours, 80% is we're a heavy capital and human capital. That's what we provide as a service with people. And that 80% number is about the number where you want to be. We've been as high as up in the high 80s when I first started here. We're now down to about 83.5%. And we are trying to, if we can, expand our services and supplies. And some people will say, why are you doing that? It's because we neglected it for 4 or 5 years, and we have no choice but to do that. Though we have human capital, that human capital that goes to fire and emergency medical calls has to have equipment. And when you neglect equipment, or you neglect stations, maintenance and stuff like that, it starts to cost more in the long run. And so we're starting to address that over this 2-year budget, and you'll see a significant increase in year number 2. So the first thing that we're meeting with labor on is an SRPP conversion. And what that would allow us to do is take 8 more ambulances that are currently staffed with firefighter paramedics and convert those to single role paramedics. I believe this is the business model for the future. This model originally was designed that when we reached a full fruition, we actually were going to add additional engine companies down the road into service. Unfortunately, we're in a spot today where we need to start this conversion process in its entirety over the next 2 years, just to be able to start to get to a point where we can reopen some companies and maintain what we have today. So in discussions with labor, they're right. Our whole goal on this thing is to increase service levels to the community. But the property tax loss was so great and the recovery has been so slow that that's accelerated us having to do this and not being able to fully implement engine-based. This program is going to reduce the amount of firefighters on duty by 19. 19 less firefighters per day on duty in this next budget year. That's the equivalent of about 4 truck companies or 5 or 6 engine companies. They're the firefighters that are on the ambulances. We told the public months ago that this is where we were headed. We were very open about it. And we heard a lot of stuff about miracles happening and there's going to be a big property tax recapture. You heard citizens get up and say, well, you're going to get this big load of money. And what are you going to spend it on? You're going to have so much. I remember sitting here. Well, they were wrong and we were right. It didn't develop. And so the bottom line is that we will be reducing the amount of firefighters on duty per day by 19 in the first year. The revenue, however, by converting this will increase by about $300,000. And there'll be a net overtime cost reduction of $2.3 million, and an additional savings between the rate of a firefighter versus a single role of about another $900,000. The other issues that we have to do is we have to do some staffing redeployments, which we're also meeting and conferring on. So we're going to take one of our trucks, and that truck will be downgraded by one person. They'll be placed on an engine. That saves us about $400,000 a year. So you'll be running an engine instead of a truck. You'll be running an engine company with 3 people instead of a truck with 4. So there's additional person loss per day, so you're up to 20. And then we're going to be going to a light force at Station 50. And what a light force is it's an engine and a truck that run together, and it has a captain, 2 engineers, and 2 firefighters. And they run together in tandem. So when they get to a fire, they operate as a 5-person company, either as a 5-person engine or a 5-person truck. It's imperative that we do not have people operating in less than 3 on the fire ground on a unit. And in this case, it's imperative that we keep them coupled together. Both of those things that I just mentioned, that in itself will save an additional $1.4 million in this budget year and $400,000 for the truck. Both of those items will disappear in the second year of this budget. So I think it's important to know that. And we had an additional light force in there that would have saved an additional $500,000, but we removed that proposal at final budget. We didn't think the cost was worth the risk on that. And so in that light force concept, you're losing another 2 firefighters per day on duty. So next year you'll be at 22 less firefighters on duty per day to serve the public here at Metro. However, the total impact to reduce the deficit is $5.3 million in savings and revenue. If we don't come up with this, we dip into our revenue, our reserves, an additional $5.3 million. And today our revenues stand at about, I believe, $17 or $18 million in our reserves, and we'll get into that a little later on. That is not something that we felt was acceptable to this board of directors or acceptable to fire management to recommend that we do that. And you'll see that in year number 2, if we don't make the cuts today, we won't turn the corner in year 2. So your loss on your fire suppression capability is the 19 that I talked about, the lower left-hand corner on daily staffing change. That strictly, I believe, comes from the paramedic units that are being downstaffed. And then you have those additional people in regards to the light force and the reduction in the truck. We have some new positions, and when I say new positions proposed for $426,000, they are positions that we have to have. We can't continue to go the direction we're going and not have these people there. Radio shop communications supervisor, that's how we communicate. Communications is safety. We've run with a rock and a stick out there for too many years. We've made a lot of progress in the last couple of years of trying to get stuff turned around. So we're adding that supervisor to make sure our communications are right. We're also going to be doing a lot of conversions of communications over the next 2 years to the new digital P25 systems. We've got a new CAD system that's going to be going in. All of that is going to have a workload that's incredible on our staff here. Also, computer systems technician is being added, and 2 office technicians, one in the radio shop and one in community risk reduction division, are being added as well. The other positions, in mid-year, you remember I asked for a battalion chief in EMS to free up Chief Clough. And unfortunately, we only had 1 battalion chief put in for that position, which is not the diversity that we wanted as far as getting a group of people to pick from. And the sad truth of it is, and what the public doesn't know, is because there is overtime impact, it's a pay cut for those battalion chiefs to go into a day staff position. So we have increased that to an assistant chief for an additional $19,000. And that assistant chief will be Scott Clough, who will end up being in administration with us, still working on EMS issues. And we'll promote an assistant chief into the day-to-day operations for EMS. What's nice about that is that those are at-will positions. So even though we're drastically understaffed, and we get to a point where we get to a balance, it's something that can be easily eliminated later on down the road without any meet and confer process. A battalion chief is a union labor position. And then, of course, at the end of this fiscal year, our SAFER grant runs out. Our SAFER grant will provide about $2.4 million this year, but it runs out about a month and a half short. So we've got to come up with $306,000 to pay for that. The good news is when we get to next year, the next fiscal year after that, we have enough money in the general fund if we enact the changes tonight and we're successful with organized labor and meet and confer, or at least coming up with that dollar figure, that we would be able to absorb those 2 trucks and keep them open in year 2 of the budget. So all of that's about a total cost of about $751,000 as we move forward. Labor costs reflect $8.9 million in savings for ongoing employee and retiree concessions. Remember, we've negotiated 12% pension contributions, retiree medical and all that. The labor union has stepped up big to do that. And as I showed you before, 14-15 labor costs are at 83.5% of operating expenditures. We are doing, I think, one heck of a job of holding things down where they need to be as much as can possibly happen. And eventually, I will tell you, there will be a pressure amongst labor down the road. They have not had a cost of living increase since 2008. So, you know, and they know there's several more years to go. But it's very difficult, in all fairness, to watch around, watch the state give pay raises and other people giving pay raises, and our employees are still sticking to the line in this board of directors of fiscal discipline and trying to get this in a very, very sustainable district. Services and supplies, again, we talked about it. Our big number is a helicopter rebuild. Let me be clear, it should be done every 10 years. It's 2 years out of service. We set that helicopter down in the city of Sacramento with a failure 3 or 4 days ago. That helicopter will make it through this fire season, and then it needs to go in and be completely retrofitted. And in the future, you will see that we set $100,000 a year aside for a helicopter for the future, plus we got a bunch of airframes that we can trade in as well for future retrofit. So we're thinking well down the lines. And then we did add about $322,000 for CAD and communications equipment because we have the P25 and the new CAD system coming on. And by the way, we are applying for grants. You know, Director Scheidegger had asked me, we will be applying for SAFER grants this year for 2 engines or 2 trucks, and we will be applying for AFG grants for our new MDTs in our engines and trucks, computers that they look at when they go. So we are working on that very, very diligently, but as you know, we don't put it in the budget unless the bird is in the hand. Debt service, all equipment lease debt service totals to about $367,000. So we have EMS and fleet and technology purchases that we're financing. The interest rates are still absolutely unbelievably low, and it's better to utilize that form. Capital outlay, we've got new vehicles of about $780,000, which is cash out. That'll be 4 ambulances, which are sprinters. We are going to be getting away from the boxes as we move forward into the single role, and 2 command staff vehicles to replace battalions 5 and 9. As you know, those SUVs which they use in the 5 battalions get run to death, and so we replace 1 or 2 of those on a yearly basis. The other thing we're really sticking to, and we accelerate it in year 2, is support services. Chief Cochran will tell you, we have not been replacing roofs. We haven't been doing maintenance on asphalt and fire stations and concrete on ramps. And the bottom line is stuff is starting to fall apart, and it is going to cost us tens of millions of dollars if we don't do something about it. So in this year, we allocated $392,000 for roof replacements and asphalt work. You'll see in next year's budget, we fully fund the asphalt and roof replacement plan. And we have 5 new Stryker gurneys, 1 bariatric gurney, and those are the gurneys we lift patients on. They're electronic, they're hydraulic or whatever to lift the patients, but it just takes 1 back injury, and a workers' comp case, you'll blow past $123,000. So they're expensive, but they're actually long-term really good for us as far as a business decision. We have development fees coming in of about $1.4 million. Our debt service, apparatus, and vehicle leases is about 1.8. And remember, our headquarters lease revenue bond is about 9 million a year. And of course, that's this building here, and we rent to Sutter down below.
It's 900,000.
I mean, 900,000. I had one director send me a thing, I read it, it said billions, I got excited. The transfer for the general fund for 1.4 million is needed to bolster that fund, because the development fees are not coming in. I mean, that's the bottom line. If there's work going on out there in development, it hasn't hit yet here. And the Sacramento region is lagging behind the Bay Area and the Los Angeles basin and stuff. I believe eventually it will come, but we're not seeing it yet here. So we have to supplement that. And again, SAFER is going to bring in 2.4 million for wages and benefits. And we did get a Homeland Security grant for 3 inflatable boats for 300,000 that we will put forward. 15-16. It's called the turn. The bottom line is we're going to end up with a surplus of 2.4 million is what we're estimating at the end of 2015-16 fiscal year. So we dip in for a little over $1 million this year into reserve. We actually put a surplus of about 2.4 million in the second year. The other issue that's still outstanding before I get too deep into this in the current fiscal year, however, is that Chief Clough has done a phenomenal job in applying for those IGTs for the HMO contracts. And, but we can't guarantee that the state isn't going to not let us have it, though we legally don't think they can. And we've signed contracts today. I think Chief Clough is still here. There he is. He's hard to see. And so at the end of the day, that could bring in an extra 2 million to 2.4 million in this fiscal year. If that happened mid-year or somewhere along those terms, you would see us come back and make changes of getting rid of light forces and making recommendations that we put staffing back in there. And of course, having a balanced budget. So that could be the difference this year. But we can't guarantee it. The insurance companies are like, you guys are eligible. We don't think anybody can stop you. We're going to put you in. We signed the contracts. But we all know how government works. And so we're not going to count on it until we actually know that they're going to pay us. And as you recall, we have to front the money. So we'll probably have to front about 3 million. And then we get our 3 million back plus 3 million minus 20%, 23% that goes to the state of California and the insurance companies for handling. Property taxes, I talked about diversifying. Now we're down to 68.8% of our budget, and you can see that medic cost recovery is at 21.3%. That's because in year 2, we finish converting the entire fleet of fire-based medics. If that program goes forward, depending on meet and confer, and there may be other ideas that they have, that takes our revenue up to around $38 million. I looked at the budget from 10-11. We were at about $16 million back in that day, and I was an interim chief when I came in, and we're going to end up at about $38 million at the second year in medic cost recovery. So again, that diversification. And then you're going to start to see capital outlay starts to get increased. And the reason for that is we have a roof replacement plan, we have an asphalt plan, and we're sticking to it, and a fleet replacement plan and equipment. And we're starting to put monies into that are significant in each year into the future to plan properly as we move forward. And we still have challenges, but we're doing that. And our labor percentage drops to around 81.1%. The additional conversion takes our total savings of up to 6.9 million. So we have 5 more ambulances that change staffing from firefighter paramedics to single role paramedics. We have 8 ambulances that from 14-15 that operate for a full 12 months in there that were converted. Net overtime cost reductions is 3.4 million. Wage differential 1.9 and revenue increase of about $1.6 million for a total of 6.9 million impact. That's pretty significant. And, you know, if in our negotiations and meet and confer, we can reach an agreement that comes up with some other way to do it, to generate that type of stuff, this may change. But right now, this also would result in going from the 19 firefighters per day, we would increase to 26 less firefighters per day. However, we will start to be able to do some restoration. First, truck 26 will be back in service. So remember, engine 26 got cut by one body, or truck 26 got cut by one body, made it an engine. That goes back to a truck. Truck 50 will no longer be a light force. That'll be a fully staffed engine and truck. We will keep the 2 trucks open that the SAFER grant paid for. Will be absorbed by the general fund and they won't close. We don't make these cost savings, those 2 trucks close when that SAFER grant runs out. And we're gonna finally reopen engine 106. So we actually start to make some progress in reopening companies. The restoration is only going to be obtainable with an SRRP conversion, or during the meet and confer process, some other idea that we can be bargained or collectively agreed to with the board, management, and labor that saves that same amount of money. Because it all comes down to the dollars. Absent the money, none of that happens. The 2 trucks basically don't. They get closed down, which are currently operating today. Engine 106 doesn't get reopened. Truck 50 still stays a light force, and we still have an engine. And again, you're down to 26 less staffing per day. 26 less firefighters per day. Now, that's an impact. We tried to do it where we weren't closing engines. If I had to close engines for 26, we'd be closing 6, 7, 8 engine companies. But we're still damaging the fire capability to an extent, the suppression capability, by doing that. But in this budget, we finally turned the corner where we can start to expand where we're going. Labor costs reflect the $9.4 million in savings from ongoing employee and retiree concessions. And again, we're at 81%. 81.1% is what labor costs of the total budget are. Service and supplies, again, stay about the same, little bit increase. This is all about properly funding roof replacements, asphalt replacements, fleet, all that stuff that has to, you know, we're $170+ million budget. You know, you can have all the people in the world, but if you can't get them to the calls and you don't have a place to house them, it doesn't do you any good. It's got to be the whole package. Debt service, we are going to have about a total of $1.2 million because we're going to start our P25 radio technology, our radio conversion, which is to digital. It's something we have to do. We don't have a choice. And we're going to have EMS and fleet. We put about an additional $1.8 million into fleet, and EMS will have additional costs for more ambulances. The P25 radio migration project adds $3 million in expense that we have to do to convert, and I believe we're financing that. Rhonda, am I correct on that?
That's correct.
And new vehicle replacement will be $1.8 million per the replacement plan, so we're actually back into our replacement plan. So roof plans, replacement plans for equipment, asphalt plans. Now all of a sudden we're starting to build a system up where we've got a total package, or we're moving towards that direction. We'll still have a ways to go. And again, will be another $284,000 towards roof replacements and asphalt work per facilities plan. What happens to our reserves? Well, remember, the ratio is based on a general fund's reserve balances divided by the total expenditures less capital asset spending. And it excludes the $4 million we set in a reserve account for workers' compensation. So, as we end the year this year, and remember the goal of the board, the policy of the board is a 15% general fund reserve. June 30th of this year, we will end up with an 11.9% general fund reserve. Next fiscal year, it'll drop to 10.7, and then in the end of year 2, it'll go up to 11.6. And when you ask yourself the question, we're controlling costs, why isn't our reserve? We're still expanding the pie. So as you put stuff in the next, back into service in the next year, you actually need a much larger reserve to equal the same percentage. And so we're actually doing pretty good here as we move forward. We're moving the right direction. Development fees, we're keeping though at 1.4 million. We don't see it yet. If it happens, that's where we'll be. New equipment leases will be at 1.8 million, and a lease revenue bond again is at 865,000, which is going to require transfer for the general fund of 1.4 million, just like we did in the first year of the fiscal budget, and no new capital projects. But the budget is balanced, and it ends with 2.4 million, even though that 2 million of that is anticipating that Citrus Heights will eventually not be successful in the redevelopment suit. They've lost every court hearing so far. We believe in the second year that we would then get that money in. So 2 million of that 2.4 is assumed from that. Also in the budget is a rise in HMO GEMT in the second year. You probably saw that in the budget, which is huge. And, you know, we're not going to stop. We're going to continue to work on the first responder fee. We'll start legislation on that, Chief Clough, probably in the next couple months. And I think that by the end of the second fiscal year, it's reasonable that we might have that in place. That could bring in an additional $9 million a year in revenue on its own by 2016. And it's in the same vein as GEMT. So the people that said that GEMT wouldn't happen, they weren't right on that either, and it did. And so I'm very confident that it will come in and it'll happen. It's just a matter of when will it happen, and we're not going to assume something, but that might help you get some engines opened up 3 years down the road. We still have challenges. We still have deferred building maintenance. We still have deferred fleet maintenance that we need to address. And we have an administration that's at a skeletal status. People breaking down, happened today, overworked, too much. And it's not us with the badges, it's the people that really make the place run. It's the civilians that are taking the impact. So will future property tax increases keep pace with expenditures and capital outlay requirements? I don't know. But I know this, we've got a good basis and a solid plan to move forward. I think using a 2-year budget model to take a look at where we're at, we'll do a couple things that are even beyond this. It'll free up our finance department, instead of doing a new budget every year, to simply be in the business of tweaking and maintaining and making sure we're staying there, and allow them to do other things that are important to help us in addressing those deferred building maintenance and fleet replacement. How do we get revenue, and looking at new ideas and thinking outside of the box? Last but least, when we were sitting here talking about a benefit assessment, and people got up and I respect them. People have opinions, you got to respect it. But when they're wrong, they're wrong. We were at $18 million in property tax recapture we were supposed to get. We lost, we're now down to 13.6. Not because we got the money, because the money went away forever. And it's scheduled to drop, we believe, by 2016 to around 9.7 million. And as you saw in those slides in the last meeting, I believe it was, it could take 40 years for a house that dropped at 2% to get back up to where it was today. But people still live in those houses. They still have medical issues. They still have fires. Those houses still exist, and they still call 911, and they still deserve the best service that they can get. And we're going to try to do that with what we have. Just an adoption schedule. Preliminary budget, of course, is tonight. Final budget no later than August 28th of 2014. And then each March and June, we will do periodic, like mid-year. It won't be mid-year, but budget. So we'll come back to you and go, this is where we're at. This is what the benchmark is. allow the policymakers, you the electeds, to give us direction on what you want to do. If we have more revenue come in, we make those adjustments on where you want it spent per the plan, and we move forward from there. And with that, I believe that concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions or staff that you may have this evening. Thank you.
Chief, I'd like to thank you for the presentation, and Ms. McFarland for all the work that it took to bring this together. Moving into this two-year model is a critically important step for us, and I just want to recognize how much effort it took to get there.
You're welcome, and I want to thank my staff as well that are present here tonight.
Questions?
Well, I know he probably stole all of her thunder. I'm quite certain he had her notes. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think everything's been said.
Okay, she covered it. You covered it well.
So, Director Scheidegger.
Well, I'd just like to, again, echo the appreciation for the hard work that this reflects, and I like the two-year approach. I think there's a lot of advantages to looking at things from a broader prism. I had a couple of questions relating to the narrative that I'd like to discuss, not only for my own benefit, but for the public that might be watching this. We talk about further erosion of mutual aid. Mutual aid is a nice concept in public service, but I think all of us that are responsible for areas of taxpayers and the level of service they're getting, we're concerned about, you know, what it's costing us versus what the benefit is. Could you talk a little bit more about what that erosion means? Does it mean we're going to provide less mutual aid? Is it quantifiable? What are the circumstances of which less mutual aid will be provided? Have we talked to our neighbors about that? I'd just like to get a little more insight into that if you could.
Yeah, I think the erosion is of capability. Clearly, you've got 21 less firefighters on duty per day. That's a challenge. When they call us, we will still go. We're in the statewide mutual aid system. Clearly, on major incidents, we get reimbursed for that, but you're really talking about the regional mutual aid that goes across the borders. And this agency gives out 200% more mutual aid than it receives. And you can be assured I'll be talking to the new fire chief of the city of Sacramento about that. I know him, and I think you do too. What we are doing in this is that I know, for example, the president of the board talked about aircraft fuel, and we fly our copter. We're regional. So Chief Holbrook is working with our neighboring agencies to start chipping in for fuel each year. We will still be able to deliver the boots on the ground, but with the light force technology and that we'll be putting into place, and that you're going to have less firefighters on duty per day, it's going to have some impact. Will we still be able to deliver service? Yeah, we're still the 800-pound gorilla in the region. I mean, we're the people that everybody comes to for help. But over this next 12 months, that is going to be infinitely strained. And clearly, you know, there are agencies that we really depended on fire-based paramedic ambulances. That's going to be somewhat of a difference. But I think the goal here is to, in the moderate term of the second year of the budget and moving forward, is to really start to take resources, and that's one of the things that we're talking to labor about. You know, labor's concern is getting engines and trucks reopened up. And so I told them that we are very amenable to that. And I think that's really an impact for them in regards to the single role. And I think their concern is, as we go down that road, how much of that gets dumped into getting engines and trucks opened up. And the expansion, I talked about the first responder fee. You know, if we get that, I think that's something we need to take a serious look at with our partners in labor and go, that gets dumped into reopening engines and trucks. That's what it's for. as we go forward. So I think we'll still be there, but it is an erosion of service because you have less firefighters on duty per day. And, we're going to see how it rolls. And luckily, at least it's only for this first 12 months. But then you're going to still have, 26 less per day as we move forward, 19 this year and 26 the next. But we're also able to keep those 2 trucks open and start to open another engine. So, and those light forces go away. So it'll start to soften a little. But it's going to be a challenge for the next 3 years.
Thank you for that. I think it's important for the taxpayers of this district to understand your efforts. Another area that I had a question on, and you touched on this in your presentation, Chief. It was not in the budget, but I want to make sure that we understand that Mr. Davis and his staff, for example, are still pursuing grants. And even though they're not, as you said, they're not mentioned in here because they're not secured yet, we're not giving up on that, and hopefully there'll be more help.
Yeah, whatever we can apply for, we've got a grant right now that's outstanding with CMS for 10 million, of which we would get 9 million of that if we were successful. We will put in for the maximum on the SAFER grant, which will be probably, Larry, 7 million or somewhere about that, 6 or 7 million over a 2-year period. 4 to 5. I was being overly optimistic. 4 to 5 million on that. We're doing grants for the MDTs that we can get. We are doing everything that we can. Larry does a great job. You'll see there's a blip that drops down. Well, we haven't been awarded anything currently, but if we got the CMS grant for 10 million, you'd see that spike right up, or another 5 million for SAFER, or whatever the dollar figure is for the MDT. So yes, we are aggressively pursuing that and working very diligently towards that.
Again, it's not in this document, but I think it's important that our taxpayers understand your efforts and what we're trying to do. Last question. In the general fund, we talk about being behind in the vehicle maintenance plan, and the replacement plan, the vehicle replacement plan, I think, is affected. What are we not getting? I mean, you touched on this, the risk versus reward of having vehicles that aren't serviceable and the safety aspects of that.
We cut $5 million out of the budget, I believe, for replacement of aerial trucks, heavy rescues, hazardous materials. All these units have reached basically the end of their life expectancy. And for the public, you buy a ladder truck, which you need, that's a $2 million purchase or thereabouts, somewhere just south of that. Engines are expensive, $400,000, maybe $350,000, $400,000. We buy in bulk. All this stuff is super, super expensive. But remember, when we buy it, we have it for 10 years front line and 10 years backup. So, at the end of the day, those are the things that we're sacrificing. And what happens is then your maintenance costs go up because the rigs are broke down all the time. And eventually what's happening is we don't have enough reserves. I will give you an example. I was at home, and we apparently sent a strike team out, and we didn't have enough Type 3s. And I got to see this 1940 unit. It wasn't that old, but it was 70, being put back in service. The Deputy Chief Holbrook said, "You're going to love this picture." And, I was waiting for Barney Fife to show up in the picture, literally. I mean, we're a major metropolitan fire department. But the taxpayers need to know we're running stuff as far as we can to do that. And that's the type of stuff that happens. And let's face it, when you have older equipment, I read 2 stories today where ladders failed. Now, we test our stuff, we follow the rules, we do the right thing, but stuff happens. And so the older the equipment, the higher the liability and the higher the risk. And that's the full package, because at the end of the day, our union labor firefighters are working on that equipment. If it fails, it's them that's probably going to get seriously injured or killed. And that's why there's got to be a balance in that.
Well, again, I appreciate that discussion, and I think our citizens need to understand the efforts that we're going through to try and balance this budget. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Please, Director Gould.
Chief, thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Ms. McFarland. I want to echo my colleagues' sentiments regarding mutual aid in the local area. And I'd actually like to see, as we look at this number of 19 less firefighters and 26 and those kinds of things, that's just, to me, unacceptable. But I think we have to have a stronger comment from this board to the region to say, we need to look at the way we do mutual aid in our surrounding cities, and we need to come up with a different program completely, because it is not working, because we are running, as you say, 200% more, and that's our money, and we're not recouping it. And so it's actually costing our organization, 19 firefighters, to position those folks and that apparatus and that equipment in other cities that have other budgets and other issues. And so in my mind, I think this board needs to come up with stronger language to challenge the chiefs in this area to come up with a better plan, maybe some kind of a pooling program where at the end of the year you determine how much those responses cost and what is the parity there, and then that other agency has to pony up a check or two, because in my mind, it's unacceptable to have 19 or 26 less firefighters for the community of Metro Fire at the expense of all these other agencies that get away with not having to staff at the same level, and then we end up paying for it. And so I do not want to see 19 firefighters from this organization walk out the door. And I believe, if my information's correct, we're running about 9,000 calls out of our district of the 81,000 and change. And Chief, and hold on one second. The other thing is, I think it's time that we start looking at limiting who can call or when you can call or what you can call about. Our dispatch numbers just continue to escalate, but we have really no method of telling someone through dispatch that calling about a fingernail pain that you've had for 4 years isn't going to cut it anymore, and we've got to figure out another way to dispatch assets to them that are more appropriate than taking an engine and an ambulance and other staff to something like that. Today, we roll what we roll to something that's just, frankly, it's ludicrous. And I don't know that our system's mature enough yet, but we got to get there where we can say that's an inappropriate use of this limited resource that we've heard about. And I think the finances are pushing us in that direction quicker than we would expect.
If I can, first off, I agree. We have to be careful, though. I mean, it's an integrated system. I mean, our overall dispatch system and the way we operate in this county is the state of the art. It's looked at from across the country, and they say that's the way you want to go with boundary drops. That's number one. Number two, in all fairness, 75% of those calls that are ambulance calls that go to those jurisdictions, of course, we do bill for that. So that's it. We're really talking about the all-risk fire suppression calls that you're talking about. And I think that going down the road of the helicopter and fuel and sharing expenses and getting them to help out is really the way to deal with that, and I think we're working on that. In regards to the issues of how we deploy EMS resources and how we deploy resources to the community to match that resource to the actual need, we are maturing fairly fast with a new CAD that will be here in the next 18 to 24 months that's there. We've also got that grant for $10 million we put in to look at alternative service delivery models. And the biggest challenge that we're facing out here is the state of California, Dr. Backer, who's the director of EMSA, wants to get into this paramedicine thing where we can do alternative treatment, leave them in their house, take them to a clinic, do different types of response capability so that when you have somebody that's a non-threatening emergency, you're not sending the big red truck and an ambulance and everything. Maybe you're sending a different type of vehicle from the fire department with a different staffing model. And maybe you're treating those people and leaving it home. This agency is on the cutting edge. Chief Clough will tell you, he told Dr. Backer just last week, we support that. The California fire chiefs, the Metro chiefs, we want to get there. There's some other partners in the state that don't really want us to infringe on that, and I don't want to pick a battle with them. So we're working towards that direction, and I hear you and I feel what you're saying, Director, but some of it's a little bit handcuffed, but we'll get there. I mean, I really think you're going to see it in the next 5 to 7 years, a fundamental change. And with that grant that we're trying to get and some of the stuff we're doing, you'll see it. I think if we're successful with labor, there's a lot of other stuff in EMS that we can be doing as well that helps us with revenue. And we'll continue to work with our neighbors and fuel, chipping in for the helicopter for fuel and stuff like that. We're going to continue to work down those roads.
Yeah, I don't think we have a choice, Chief. 19
And I will say,
firefighters.
and I
don't
will
think we have a
say,
choice.
we are working well. We've got some studies on the airport going on and stuff like that with the County of Sacramento, county airports, and we're looking at a lot of different ways that we can save dollars and stuff as well in that service delivery model as well.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment again on the 19 firefighters. This is a hard pill to swallow. we keep saying that we're doing more with less. The 19 firefighters is more firefighters on duty than what the jurisdiction that I work in. We cover 108, 110,000 people. We don't even have that on duty for staffing. That is a lot. That is a big impact. 19 firefighters less, that's more than a first alarm assignment. That's huge amount of people that we're missing on our fire capabilities. And yeah, it's like that, you can dodge that bullet most of the time. Most of the time it's going to work out, but eventually it's going to bite you in the butt. And but we have to. I mean, we can't, I do not want to operate a deficit budget. And this is what I do like about the 2-year plan is we are working to get those positions back. I don't think staff is saying that we don't need those 19 firefighters. I haven't heard that from anybody, that those 19 firefighters are not needed and that we can do without them. Everybody is trying to do this budget to get them back, and hopefully we can continue to work and with labor and we can get those positions reinstated.
Yeah, I will just say that not only do we need those firefighters back, and the 6 engine companies that we closed reopen, our Citygate plan says we need multiple more engines to cover our district. So this fire chief and this administration, and I believe the board, we realize we need drastically more. That's why we reached out to the public several months ago and said, hey, this is the situation that we're in, and this is what's going to happen behind door number 2. And I think there was a disbelief, even amongst the media. They didn't believe that was going to happen. And then tonight it is. We're an agency that's transparent. We're going to do what we say we have to do. And no, I do not support running this district with 26 less firefighters on duty per day. You are dodging a bullet. But I don't see any other way around it. Hopefully in our meet and confer with labor, we can come up with some alternative.
No, go ahead. That's fine. I'll go next.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's important to remember that we had a plan to take care of this problem, and that there were groups out there that opposed a benefit assessment, and certainly those groups seem to throw caution to the wind when it comes to public safety or even education. They have strangled the education system in this country for many, many years, and now even with the knowledge that every minute of delayed response time lessens the chances for a stroke victim or a cardiac patient to recover. And we understand that with flashover in a fire, a structure fire, that the fire doubles every minute that the fire continues. And these people have said, regardless of how good you have demonstrated that a benefit assessment is necessary to be able to continue your services, they didn't care. And so this is where we're at now. Mm-hmm. I think those organizations don't necessarily represent everybody in this community, and I'd like to hear more from those other people in the community that believe that Metro Fire shouldn't operate at these deficits, or I should say the deficit of personnel that we're looking at it not being able to continue to staff. So just wanted to put those 2 cents in. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair? Yeah, thank you.
Please.
I'd like to thank the chief and senior staff and my fellow directors for all the comments and information and plans that have been presented to get us through these next 24 months. I would like to make it clear to folks watching tonight that we are repositioning firefighters. No one's being laid off, and I think that's very, very important. That didn't get misconstrued. They are being redeployed so that we can maintain engines and trucks with advanced life support capability in response to help complement our ambulance service. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So I think that's very, very clear. Our force is intact, but because of the extreme revenue drop in property taxes, we have to redeploy the firefighters that we have. It's going to be challenging. There's going to be extra super pressure on the ops division to make sure that we meet all the safety requirements when we have multiple structures, fires, as we have had tonight. And that's that's just going to increase these pressures. If we can maintain this structure for the next 12 months through this 2-year budget, like the chief said, we can turn the corner. And that's very, very important that folks realize this is a short-term resolution to incredible challenges that this district faces. And I want to thank my fellow board of directors, the chief and his staff, for addressing these head-on. We all need to work together, administration, labor, board, and help to solve these issues. I have a very high confidence level in all of us that we will be able to do this. So thank you again, Chief, for your report.
Seeing no further comments, we will take these items one at a time, beginning with Resolution A.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we adopt Resolution A.
And I have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Director Wood? Scheidegger? Gould?
Aye.
Pearson?
Aye.
Clark? Kelly?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
And Rosali?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving into Resolution B.
Mr. Chair, I move Resolution B, 2014-15 and 15-16 preliminary budgets for the Capital Facilities Fund 212D.
I have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Director Wood? Scheidegger? Gould?
Aye.
Pearson?
Aye.
Clark? Kelly?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
And Rosali?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving then to item C.
Mr. Chair, I move Resolution Item C, 14-15, 15-16 preliminary budgets for the pension obligation bonds, POB, Fund 212E.
I have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Director Wood? Scheidegger? Gould?
Aye.
Pearson?
Aye.
Clark? Kelly?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
And Rosali?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving into item 1D.
Mr. Chairman, I would move Resolution 2014-15, 2015-16 preliminary budgets for Grants Fund 212G.
I have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Director Wood? Scheidegger? Gould?
Aye.
Pearson?
Aye.
Clark? Kelly?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
And Rosali?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving into item 1E.
Mr. Chairman, I would make the motion that we approve Resolution E, the 2014-15 and 2015-16 preliminary budgets for the Leased Properties Fund 212L.
I have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Director Wood? Scheidegger? Gould?
Aye.
Pearson?
Aye.
Clark? Kelly?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
And Rosali?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving into action item 2, professional services agreement for legal services, Downey Brand. Chief Hinkie.
Yes, this is a follow-up to the benefit assessment, the letter that we received from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and Mr. Kupal in regards to the legality of Prop 218. We decided, and the board was pretty intense. I think there was a lot of desire for us to move forward, and we received that letter that I would describe from Mr. Kupal as somewhat bullying. We decided that we should have a separate legal counsel that specializes in that, take a look at it. And on recommendation of one of our consultants, we engaged Downey Brand, and the reason we engaged Downey Brand and the reason it's here before you tonight is they're not on our regular list, but we engaged them because of their expertise in the SAFCA and the 218 for the SAFCA and the flood control. And uniquely enough, we've met with them twice, Chief Holbrook and I have. In the first meeting, we provided them all of our documentation to take a look at. We wanted a second set of eyes on it from a legal standpoint. And then we met with them this week, I believe, Monday. It's all run together. And they can find no foundation for the position of that Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And in fact, they use flood control as a classic example that when the levee breaks, and the cradle rocks and the tree falls, or however all that goes, all the houses get flooded, and yet that's a Prop 218 benefit assessment. And so we have asking you tonight to approve this contract to do several things, to do research for us, but also to go through our original legal documents and our engineering report, which they have already done, and identified about 6 areas in the legal arena that they would tweak and strengthen, and to come back with a recommendation. I do not believe it's going to be upwards near of 100,000, but that's what the contract's for, up to. They figure it'll take a couple months to do that, and then be able to come back to us, for us to make a decision on the, what the board would do if we were to take the benefit assessment forward. And the reason I bring that up is, we have reconvened the stakeholders group. And the stakeholders group met yesterday. We are going to be reaching out to people such as the Sacramento County Taxpayers Association, Rental Housing Association, and some other groups, and adding them to the original committee that we had. We're going to take them and update them on where we are at, what we said was going to happen, show them what did happen, which we did with the stakeholders group yesterday as it exists. And the stakeholders group yesterday said they are in support of that and think we should move forward in that direction. So this is a sole source really for legal services because they're not on a regular schedule to select. But the reason for that is because they have the expertise in this area, this region, dealing with 218 and SAFTA, which they're extremely successful on. So with that, we're asking you to approve this contract, and I do have it in the existing budget for next year.
I have a motion and a second.
I have a question.
Oh, Director Gould?
Chief, on this particular instance, I'm assuming we're treading out into areas that there hasn't been a great deal of case law about. And I would imagine that because of the uniqueness of our independent special district, that there's some unique applications to 218. I'm just hoping that as we are the front runners again in this arena, that potentially some of our brothers and sisters in the state that have independent special districts and will utilize some of our knowledge could pay a little of that back to us.
Well,
So that we're not putting 100G out front and then they get free benefit of all the work that our legal team would be doing.
Let me address that. Excuse me. We're not the front runner anymore.
Uh-oh.
There were some fire districts that did pass or are in the process of passing. I would prefer not to name them because I don't want to out them so that they can run down and deny their citizens the ability to have a vote. Because that's really what they're doing. Howard Jarvis denies the people to have the ability to vote. It's okay if they vote no, but they're denying the ability to vote. And so we have an entity that already is out in front of us. They have not been sued yet. We don't know what's going to happen with that. Our counsel is working and will be seeking out their counsel on that. So everybody is working to support and see who's going to be the first and whether the case is the best or not. And this is a case of statewide import because it is. They basically are saying you have no ability to vote on this issue. So.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Further comments? I have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Director Wood? Aye. Scheidegger?
Aye.
Gould?
Aye.
Pearson?
Aye.
Clark? Kelly?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
And Orzali?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving into action item 3, the election of California Special District Association, CSDA, Board of Directors for Seat C. Ms. Pinelli, you'll be carrying this?
Yes. Good evening, President Orzali, Board of Directors, Chief Henke. This evening before you, you have the opportunity to vote for a representative to the Special Districts Association Board of Directors. This ballot will be cast and the representative will serve in Region 2, Seat C. Each of CSDA's 6 regional divisions have 3 seats on the board. Candidates are a board member or a management level employee in the agency's geographic region, and each district in good standing shall be entitled to vote for 1 candidate. And before you this evening, you have the option of two candidates. You have Director Pearson, who is one of our directors, and also Frederick Gale, who is the Director of Sacramento Suburban Water District. Director Pearson is running as the incumbent, and he would serve a term beginning in 2015 and expiring in 2018. So this evening, staff is recommending the board nominate and vote for one candidate to be elected as the representative for CSDA's Board of Directors, Region 2, Seat C. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Recommend that this board nominate and vote for Director Pearson.
I will second that.
I have a motion and a second.
I third that. Can we just go down and get fourth, fifth, and
Yeah,
sixth?
we can probably get a fourth, fifth, and sixth. And even though I worked with Mr. Gale on a number of initiatives in the past, I clearly support Metro's director. So with that motion, second, fourth, fifth, and sixth, would the clerk please call the roll?
Director Wood?
Aye.
Scheidegger?
Aye.
Gould?
Aye.
Pearson?
Aye.
Clark?
Definite aye.
Kelly?
You knew he was gonna do that.
Jones?
Affirmative.
And Orzali.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving then to item 4, California Department of Water Resources, DWR State Grant Subword Acceptance. And Mr. Davis.
Davis is going, what?
Me?
Me? My name's on there? This would be a winger.
Sorry about that. Director Larry Davis, Chief Development Officer. The item in front of you is a acceptance of a grant from the State of California Department of Water Resources to update our flood response plan for the district. The grant's for $50,000, and asking that you approve it.
So move.
Second.
Just a quick question.
Please.
What exactly is that $50,000 going to cover? What are we doing with it?
Primarily for a consultant. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what? Oh, okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
I'll ask the question offline, thank you.
Okay. No further questions? Thank you, Mr. Davis. So we have a motion and a
Yes,
second.
Oh, okay.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Director Wood?
Aye.
Scheidegger?
Aye.
Gould?
Aye.
Pearson?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
And Orzali?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Moving then to presentations. And Ms. Pinillo is going to be conducting a conflict of interest code.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? Is there any way we could table this discussion until next time we meet?
Well, could it be done? Yes, it could be.
I'm just wondering, just a question that, I think that this is a pretty important topic and the entire board ought to be here. So if it's not offensive to our board clerk, I'm just wondering if maybe we could wait and have this next time. So I make the motion to table the presentation.
I second it.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Would the clerk please call the roll? But before we do that, there might be another option here. Rather than do this, because nothing makes me think that the full board will be here at the next meeting. And if we start this on a rotational meeting, we could be at it for a long time.
Yeah.
So I would advocate for us looking at making this presentation available, as it obviously would be, through video to board members who were absent tonight, and moving forward.
Let's hope he'll.
I rescind
be
my
watching on
motion.
Saturday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or
I-
whatever it is.
Mr. President, I can make that happen if that's the desire of the board.
Well, we have, Director Gould has rescinded his request. So, any further discussion?
No, let's see it.
Okay, then,
So before you this evening, we have some information on the Conflict of Interest Code. To give you a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about this evening, there's some government code sections that pertain to the Conflict of Interest Code, brief history of Metro Fire's conflict code, as well as our current code and how we would go about amending the Conflict of Interest Code. The government code that this falls under is part of the Political Reform Act of 1974. The state of California passed this initiative in June of 1974, and it allows for elected officials to perform their duties in an impartial manner. The act is a starting point in consideration of conflict of interests, those laws in California, and Chapter 7 deals directly with conflict of interests. So it was important to me to include Section 87100, that's the first section there, and it states that no public official at any level of state or local government shall make, participate in making, or in any way attempt to use his or her position to influence a governmental decision in which they have a financial interest. I included Section 87200 because this is actually the area that the Fair Political Practice Commission thinks that you fall under as a board member, as well as our Deferred Compensation Committee. And I'm going to touch on this later, but it was important to reference now. Conflict of interest codes are specifically referenced in sections 87300 through 87314. The first section talks about every agency adopting a conflict of interest code, which we have done, pursuant to the provisions of this article. To give you a brief history of how we got to where we are today, in 2008, Metro Fire worked with the Fair Political Practice Commission to amend our conflict of interest code. This amendment included reflecting the agency's current name. Before then, we were working under American River's conflict code. And we added positions, deleted positions, retitled positions as a result of the reorganization, and adjusted some of the disclosure categories. It was important to include the certificate of FPPC approval. The FPPC did approve our current code on March 12th of 2009, and it became effective 30 days later on April 11th of 2009. We asked General Counsel to review our current code and make sure that it is in line with the requirements for special districts per Government Code 87302, and in fact it is. And I also wanted to note that we've filed biennial notices with the Fair Political Practice Commission with the most recent filing in 2012, and that's per Government Code 87306.5. Those biennial notices are filed every 2 years on even years. So in October of this year, we'll be filing another biennial notice unless there's an amendment. I wanted to give you an idea of the designated positions in our current code. As you can see, there are several positions, upper management, that need to be mindful of these conflicts. Just to point out, the fire chief is under disclosure category number 1. You'll notice that all positions have disclosure categories to the right. And another example would be our information technology manager. That employee would be under disclosure category 6. And I'm going to talk a little more about disclosure categories in a moment. So like I mentioned before, you as a board of director fall under Government Code 87200, so that's why your position is not listed on that list of designated positions, as well as the Deferred Compensation Committee. So those individuals in one of those positions, the Fair Political Practice Commission has determined that you do hold a position affected by this government code, and that's why you file under that area. We have 10 disclosure categories. The first disclosure category being the most broad, and so, for example, the fire chief will be disclosing all investments and business positions in business entities, sources of income, including gifts, loans, and travel payments, and interests in real property located within the jurisdiction or within 2 miles of the boundaries of the jurisdiction or within 2 miles of any land owned or used by the district. Another example would be disclosure category 6, which I talked about our IT manager would file under, and that position would disclose any investments and business positions in and sources of incomes, including gifts, loans, and travel payments from business entities which manufacture or supply or manufacture information technology equipment, supplies or services of the type utilized by the district. So you can see that's a little more narrow of a disclosure category, and it would make sense for that position to be disclosing of finances in those nature. Some frequently asked questions I get when employees fill out the Form 700, and just to give you an idea, we ask about 40 employees, that's how many on our designated list are asked to fill out the Form 700s, to be mindful of several schedules. They have Schedule A through E to take into consideration. And there's definitely some more common reportable interests, and then there's some common non-reportable interests. So, for example, Schedule B would be where you would disclose any rental property in the jurisdiction. However, residence that you use exclusively as a personal residence, you would not need to disclose. Another question I get often is the gifts area, so that's found under Schedule D. You would need to disclose gifts from businesses such as tickets to sporting events, and they do have a threshold, a limit that they usually adjust every year or 2 years. But a non-reportable interest would be something from a family member. So those are some reportable interests and some non-reportable interests that you can just be mindful of. If we were to move forward with an amendment, then there would be some things to look towards maybe changing. There would be a goal of including new positions and assigning disclosure categories, deleting positions, and revising titles. The necessary steps in order to do a substantive amendment would be to prepare the new conflict code. We would have to file a notice of intent with a 45-day comment period, and we would have to notice all members of the public and each employee affected by this amendment. File a notice of intention with the Fair Political Practice Commission at least 45 days before the close of the comment period. And we would do this, I would imagine, in a board meeting, in an action item, and also have a publication in a local paper. Once all that is completed, we will submit the proposed code amendment with a declaration from the CEO or the fire chief, a summary of any hearing, including the names and addresses of any participants, copies of all written comments, along with written justification for the changes, a current copy of our organization chart, and the job description of the affected positions. So that concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have or open it up to any comments.
Is the policy committee determined that there's a need for any revision of our current conflict of interest code? Policy committee?
I'm sorry. What was
No,
that now?
Okay.
Start again.
I was wondering if the
I was
policy.
in deep contemplation.
I was wondering if the policy committee had looked at this and whether or not there is a need for additions, deletions, modifications to the conflict of interest code.
We have not looked at it, but we would
Okay.
be willing to do that if there are, and I assume that there could be some changes, and I'd be more than happy to look at it with the policy committee.
Right. Well, Mr. Chair, I believe this was a presentation item and for consideration, and I'm assuming that there have been no red flags thrown up in terms of, more of this is a reminder, an exercise for us to go through these very, very important issues, codes, and for any clarification that might be needed. But I would like to thank the clerk very much for preparing the presentation.
And for helping assist prepare the Form 700s each year.
Oh, huge.
And I would like to thank the clerk for the 200 questions I'm going to be calling her about. Further comments? Thank you, Ms. Padilla. Excellent report.
Thank you.
Moving then to the president's report. There's no president's report for this evening, so we will move to the fire chief's report. Chief Hinkie.
Well, first and foremost, on a happy issue, we certainly as Metro Fire, and I know the board knows, but I don't know if the public at large knows, but we're very proud to announce that the city of Sacramento has selected Assistant Chief Walt White, who worked for us in training, to be their new fire chief, and would like to issue our congratulations. I think that he's going to do a tremendous job in that organization over there, and will be very progressive in bringing state-of-the-art ideas. He has a tremendous department that he's going to work for. The Sacramento City Fire Department is a very world-class organization, and on the other hand, they're very fortunate to get somebody of Chief White's caliber there. So I think that's a great match, and we're really looking forward to working together with him. And I promise I won't remind him that he used to work for me at the Metro Chiefs meetings. And I will, however, not be able to tell him that he has to shorten his reports down like I used to be able to do. So anyways, we're very excited for him, and he's going to do a tremendous job there. I attended a meeting in regards to the high-end officials of different entities, California Public Agency Fire and EMS Service Delivery Summit that was held at the Holiday Inn yesterday. California Metro Chiefs, I represented them, Cal Fire Chiefs, Cal Fire, Cal OES, California Professional Firefighters Labor Organization, Fire Districts Association, and League of California Cities on two tremendously important issues. One was cooperative agreements, and in regards to state organizations taking over municipal fire protection, or vice versa. A tremendous discussion, went well, and then in the afternoon, Chief Clough did a presentation on emergency medical services delivery, and as a unified voice, what we're going to do in California as we move that forward. I will be attending the Metro Chiefs and Fire Scope meeting on the 9th and 10th of next month in Burbank. Also, we had a command staff on the 18th strategic planning workshop. We brought Mr. Ives in for our actual command staff, a lot focused on succession planning and where we're going, and more importantly, we took what your strategic goals were from the board setting session, and we put that into a program that we'll be bringing back to you to show you how we will address what your requests and your issues are. So it was interactive. You set where you wanted to go. We put together and putting together the plan on how to get there to deliver the deliverables for you folks. And then on the 16th, I testified at the Legislative Oversight Committee, which is a series of senators and assembly members, and regarding the risks of crude oil shipment by rail. It's important that we, myself and the Cal OES Fire Chief Kim Zagaris, really pushed forward money for training and it was received very well. I know that Chief Holbrook has had a lot to do with that in the crude oil shipment business and laid out a lot. I would not have been able to testify at the level I did if it hadn't been for Chief Holbrook's assistance and guidance. But I do think that we are going to be able to get additional training dollars. And in fact, out of that testimony, I had a refinery call me about potentially helping us with the Zinfandel project. So I think that they apparently watched the testimony, and so we're going to continue, Larry Davis and I, to push forward on that as well. On the 28th, which is, I believe, this Saturday, is the Byrne Institute Tropical Affair. On the 3rd is Academy Class 14-1 graduation, 6 p.m. at the Croatian American Cultural Center. July 15th through the 18th is Fire Camp. And then on the 7th and 8th, Metro Fire will be hosting the fire chief and command staff of the Las Vegas Fire Department, as well as their labor representatives, who will be here to analyze and discuss our emergency medical services system, our dispatch, the way we run single role, the way we run our EMS system. If you have not seen it, Las Vegas is in a pretty interesting deal with a private ambulance company down in Las Vegas. That company also works here with us. We have a tremendous relationship here with them. That may not necessarily be the case down there, and it's made national news. So they are coming here for us to give them a presentation in regards to how we do business, and we're looking forward to that. New hires effective 6/16, Dana Lips, Secretary to Community Risk Reduction, and on 6/19, Sarah Walter, Office Tech and Community Risk Reduction. No reinstatements, reassignments. HR is accepting letters of interest to create a list for the position of training captain. It closes at 6:30, date of June 30th at 5 p.m. No retirements, no recruitments. Promotions, on 6/29, we promoted the following captains: Rashawn Fulcher, Bryce Mitchell, Michael McDaniel, Joel Roberts, Brad Reynolds, Christopher Rasica, Matt Cole, and Aaron Montgomery. And congratulations to all of those people. And that concludes my comments this evening. I would just like to read in closing the press release, if you didn't see it, in regards to Chief White that we put out. It says, Sacramento, California Metro Fire is extremely proud to learn that the city of Sacramento selected Metro Fire Assistant Chief Walt White to be their new chief. A consummate professional, Chief White's ethics and integrity will provide him the foundation to be a tremendous leader of the Sacramento Fire Department. His commitment to the fire service will make him an invaluable regional partner in the delivery of fire and emergency medical services to the Sacramento County and surrounding region. It is an honor for Metro Fire and a testament to the quality of our employees and culture to have one more of our chief officers selected to be the fire chief of another department in the state of California. Previous Metro Fire chiefs that have continued on to become fire chief are Dan Haverty, Folsom Fire, Rick Martinez, West Sacramento, Fire Chief Win Latta, Roseville, Fire Chief Jeff Metzinger, Sacramento County Airport System Fire Chief, and Steve Contalmi, Fire Chief, Office of Emergency Services, County of Sacramento. I would just say I think that's a pretty impressive list of this organization sending people across the state and the region, and we wish Chief Walt White well. Thank you.
President Orzali, members of the board, Chief Hinkie, my name is Chris Holbrook. I am the Operations Chief for Metro Fire. I apologize for the commotion that happened here earlier. We have several significant incidents literally surrounding the agency right now. Multiple structures burning in the south area, 2 rollover accidents are causing all kinds of problems out there tonight. Relative to that, as we close out, for all intents and purposes, the first 6 months of this year, you are on pace to increase your call volume by over 2,000 calls this year alone. In the last 2 weeks, we have had 3,308 total calls with over 6,138 pieces of apparatus on the road for those incidents. That includes 14 working structure fires and 2,650 EMS calls. That's in the last 14 days with a transport rate of 73%. And I will conclude my comments with congratulations to the 8 fire captains that were just promoted, and we look forward to seeing you on July the 3rd at the Recruit Academy graduation, where 34 cadets shall walk the walk across the stage. Chief Hinkie will pin them. That is July the 3rd at the Croatian Center over off of Auburn Boulevard. So with that, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. And as in reference to Chief White, a letter has been forwarded from myself representing the board, congratulating the chief on his appointment. Moving then to committee and delegate reports.
Does the local have anybody?
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed 522. It's my second time in a row doing that. Representing for Local 522? Then I was right the first time. And we'll move on. Thank you. So,
General Counsel.
moving then to General Counsel's report.
No report.
And moving then to the Executive Committee. The Executive Committee met this evening with a proposal for an annualized calendar. Comments were taken and greatly appreciated, and this item will now be moving forward to the full board at our next meeting. And the next meeting of the Executive Committee has not been scheduled. Looking then at Communication Center JPA, Chief Cockrum. Thank you. Moving then to item 3, California Fire and Rescue Training JPA.
Mr. Chairman, fellow board members, the JPA met earlier today, and I attended that meeting. We approved our preliminary budget. We approved some funds to be reimbursed to this agency for various things at the training center, and I believe to move a 737, is it? 27, that we currently possess out to our training center. And then it was an employment offer was approved for a new training, or a new director of the JPA, Ruben Grijalva. So look forward to seeing him come on board. I've heard good things about him, and that's it for my report this evening.
Thank you. Finance Committee with Director Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next meeting of the Finance Committee will be July 10th at 5 p.m. in this location.
Thank you. And the Policy Committee with Director Pearson.
We have not met since our last meeting, and we have no meeting scheduled unless there's a need from the board for the new policy that we discussed today. We'd be willing to look at that if that's a need.
Thank you. Seeing then that we have a closed session item, we'll then adjourn into closed session.
There's no closed session.
Do you have board member comments, Mr. President?
Board member comments. Missed that one. So let's go to board member comments, and we'll start with Director Wood.
I just want to thank Ms. Bonilla for the conflict code and all the help that we will be getting with the 700 forms. It was very informative, and I appreciate that. The budget, all of the work that the chief has done, his staff, Rhonda, your staff, it was excellent, and I appreciate that. And Chief, wish you well with the meet and confer process that you have to engage in. Hopefully, we will be able to meet those goals that we've set. I wish Chief White the best. I appreciate all of his help, his courtesies over the last year and a half since I came on board. He was always there to answer questions, and I appreciate it, and I wish him well. And just beyond that, just have a safe 4th of July, and good luck to all of our men and women out there.
Thank you. Director Scheidegger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to echo the comments about the budget, particularly the hard work on the part of our finance people, and Chief, good presentation. Again, I think it's really futuristic for us to go to a 2-year budget. I think it's the right thing to do, and I think it gives a much better perspective. And I know that was a lot of extra work. And again, just all the best to Walt White. We'll miss him, and a great addition to this community.
Thank you. Director Gould.
Congratulations, Chief White, on your new appointment. I think that's wonderful. Chief, also thank you to you for the type of leadership that you have of moving individuals in this organization up into the statewide opportunities that present themselves. That takes quite a decent amount of leadership to encourage that and support it. And so I appreciate that, because those men and women get to go out and see things in different lights and then bring it back to our organization and also share the ideas that have been germinated here and share those with others. So thank you for that, because that really shows the quality of the people that we have here. And then obviously, thank you to the men and women who every single day are running way more calls than they should and burning them out and getting tired and doing all that really hard work, boots on the ground. I appreciate them and the attitudes that they have as we go through some of these difficult times. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Director Pearson.
Yeah, again, congratulations to Chief White. He'll do well over there. And then also, thank you to the staff, the command staff, trying to, with the budget and the finance committee department. As far as trying to make a silk purse out of his house a year, really is what it is. I mean, I don't think anyone's jumping up and down saying, yay, we're, getting rid of these fire medics. And on another note, I find it interesting that sometimes unions in general, and especially our fire union and the local paper, is demonized and told that they're only after money and that's all they do it for. And the fact of the matter is, we just, through staff and stuff, found a way to save some money by reducing these single role medics. If the union was so greedy, as some people would like to believe, they could take that money and say, we want it in our raise. They haven't had a raise in 8 years or so. They could take that money and say, well, that's our money. We want it all in our pocket. But what they're after, and what they're trying to work out with the management and everyone else, is getting engines and trucks back in service for the community. That's where their heart lies. That's what they want. They want to provide a good level of service to the community that they serve. And that is not overlooked by this director. I realize what they're trying to do. I would love to give them a raise. I think they deserve it. I am one that does not believe that they are underpaid in any way, shape, or form. I don't think any of our administrative staff is underpaid. I think our support staff, the chief said it, they've done so much with so little. They are working extra hours. They're doing all this stuff to help keep the firefighters out on the street. So the whole district as a whole has given up so much, and that's not lost to me. I understand that. And this budget was difficult for me. Just the thought of having 26 less firefighters on the street is, because I know what's going to happen. Those firefighters are going to show up to that house. They're going to do their job. And they're going to do it whether they have enough people on scene or not. They're going to do it. And that puts them at risk. And I think Director Kelly summed it up. We told the community that this day was coming and that we needed some help. And they, in their infinite wisdom from their other jobs that they do, being a clerk or something like that, that makes them a fire service manager somehow. And they decided that we didn't need that money and that we could cut staffing. And it's a bullet that we're dodging, and I hope in the next 2 years we're able to dodge it. Because if we lose a firefighter over this, I'll be upset. Everyone will be upset. But I will clearly state that it's none of our and none of the staff's fault. We have done everything we can to keep firefighters out on the street, and we need more. So hopefully the citizens will realize that we're not trying to get more money, pad our pocketbooks, because none of that's been discussed today. Nowhere in this budget was it discussed that we're cutting the staffing so that, our firefighters can get more overtime or that our firefighters can get a bigger raise. It was putting firefighters back on the street. So I think that's important to note. With that, I'll shut up.
Thank you. Director Clark.
Mr. Chairman, I also echo the comments made by the directors before me. I also like to congratulate Chief White on his new appointment. I think it's really great. It's a reflection of we talked about that already, that was commented on, of Metro Fire and the quality and the caliber of people that are coming out of this organization. I'd also like to thank Rhonda McFarland and her staff for the presentation. They did a wonderful job. Thank you. Also, I'm looking forward to the graduation ceremony coming up on the 3rd. And finally, I'd like to wish everyone a safe 4th of July. Remember, be safe out there. Our resources are strained, and you know, we're doing everything we can to keep the level of service that we've always provided. So, once again, above all else, please be safe out there in the with fireworks and so on. You know, in general. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Director Kelly.
Hi, I'd like to say congratulations to all the new captains. And I would like to, again, reiterate my thanks to the chief, the executive staff, finance for putting together, if it was anything, it was certainly a creative and innovative budget that helps this district through the next 2 years. So I appreciate your leadership and your foresight on that issue. Thanks again for the hard work, and appreciate all the finance staff coming to the meeting tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. And Director Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 additional items. One is that I would like to thank Chief Chris Holbrook for responding to some citizen questions and concerns from my community group. He was extremely responsive and got back to me quickly. We were able to resolve those at the Community Association meeting. I very much appreciate that quick and accurate response. And congratulations to all the folks. We have Chief White, we have our new captains, and we have our future firefighters coming on board next week. Congratulations to each and every one. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And with that, we'll then go into closed session.